Welcome to another special bonus episode of the Remarkable Retail Podcast, recorded live at Grocery Shop 2022 in Las Vegas. Steve and I were thrilled to be together in person, thanks to our friends at Marketile, to chat with several other remarkable thought leaders in the grocery industry attending the conference. Let's listen in now. Krystina, welcome to the Remarkable Retail Podcast. How are you doing this morning?
I am doing wonderfully. How are you?
I'm fabulous. You are at the end of a marathon.
I am.
Which wasn't 4 days. It was for you months. So how are you feeling? You look amazing. I wouldn't, if you sat in front of me, I would not know that you were the fourth day of a 4-day conference.
You're very kind to say that. But no, it's, I think whenever you get on site, you experience this next level of adrenaline in your body, and then you totally crash for about, 3 or 4 days after the show. So I think I'm still kind of riding that high of the excitement of the event and the excitement of being around our incredible attendees. But yes, I will not look like this in about 24 hours. So.
Well, and we're catching you just before you go on the stage to do a wrap for the show, kind of a content wrap. So thank you for fitting us in. Why don't we start at the beginning? Tell us about yourself. Who are you? We kind of know what you do for a living, but what's your background? How'd you get into this gig? And tell us more about yourself.
Yeah, great question. I like to think of myself as a reformed journalist. So Steve and I actually go back a couple of years to my days when I was a retail reporter for CNBC.com. I was there for probably about 4 or 5 years. Also did a stint at Women's Wear Daily as a web editor there. So I think storytelling in retail has always kind of been in my blood. I love the industry. I love meeting people who are way smarter than me and learning from them, and just kind of creating content. And so I actually went to Shoptalk when I was at CNBC covering the event. And when I decided that I was ready to move on from journalism, I found out that Shoptalk had an opening, and I think I literally went in to interview on a Monday. I had a job offer by lunchtime, and I put in my 2 weeks notice the following day. So in retrospect, that was pretty stupid, but it's worked out. It's worked out pretty well. Well,
you make quick decisions. Let's talk about the longer decision. Did you always want to be a journalist? Did you always want to be a writer? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think I did. I just love, I feel like storytelling is so cliche. I love storytelling grounded in fact, right? And sort of, I think what's nice about what we do at Shoptalk that sort of parallels, because I get the question a lot, kind of like, how did you move from journalism into events? And when you think about the overall agenda, it's crafting a story. It's trying to whittle down everything that's happening in the industry across different functional units into 60 sessions, which is incredibly hard to do, making each session, very sort of distinct and have a purpose. But in addition to that, I always think about, going back to journalism, you have to have your 3 sources, right? You have to have your sort of like industry expert, you have to have your consumer, you have to have XYZ. And that's very much how we think about sessions here, right? Should we have an established retailer? Should we have an established CPG brand, and then maybe we round it out with a VC-backed startup, so that you're really kind of getting 3 different slices on the same topic and really sort of creating the richest conversation for the folks in the audience.
Let's talk about the tradecraft of putting this on. How and when does this all start? Like in 4 days from today? Give us a sense of the work that goes into that planning and pulling it all together? It's
a really good question. Typically, we come up with an agenda about, I would say, 9 months prior to the show.
I think a rough draft
exactly.
Kind of thing.
It's always changing. I mean, even in the days leading up to the show, if we hear a topic that wasn't top of mind, 9 months prior when we were crafting the agenda, we find a way to work it in. We're always just kind of like very nimble with that. But it's been a very chaotic show planning cycle over the past couple of years with COVID. So, I think we are just finally finding our footing into that traditional planning cycle where we will start 9 months out from here. After we get back from the show, first and foremost, we want to look at attendee feedback. We want to look at session ratings. We want to see what was most attended, least attended, what, critical feedback did people have, what positive feedback did they have. For example, this year we did additional sessions in the case studies format because that was something people said in the survey feedback last year that they wanted. They said last year that they wanted more content on profitability. We really hit that hammer incredibly hard this year, as you saw across the agenda on the main stage. So we just really try to incorporate that feedback, take some time to slow down and think strategically before we get too far ahead. But then, it's full force from there.
Last question on the tradecraft.
Yeah.
Did your organization, do you think the conference industry learned anything from the COVID experience?
Well, I don't know about the industry as a whole, but we certainly did. I I don't want to sound like a cliche retailer talking about how they, built the building blocks of all these capabilities before the pandemic hit, but in a way we really did, right? Through our hosted program, which is essentially, we use our proprietary platform and matching algorithms to pair retailer and brand attendees for high impact meetings on site. We were able to take those building blocks and leverage them into virtual meetings programs. I think very similar to the retail industry, we learned very quickly that just replicating what you do on site online does not work, right? We tried that.
Visit the virtual booth in section B in room 5
well, even
online.
Even content, right? Yeah. It becomes so commoditized, and
shorter attention. Like the online, you can't. It's just everything was a bit hard. But what surprises me is I don't see more integration of. Now here's our speaker from Germany coming on the screen with a live interview kind of thing. Do you imagine that happening, or do you think that just too much harkens back to too much time on screen from COVID?
So what it is for us is we just kind of feel like it's the worst of both worlds when you try to do a hybrid, right? You want butts and seats at the end of the day. Yeah. Speakers want butts and seats. They want to feel like they're talking to a full room. And then vice versa, I think about it like when I go to a fitness class, right? When I'm there and I'm with the teacher, it's very experiential. They're paying attention to me. They're, fixing my form, whatever.
They're connecting with you, right?
And then when you're virtual, it's kind of like you're being ignored because they're talking to everyone else in the class. And I think that's kind of what happens when you're watching content virtually that's meant to be consumed in person.
Sure. So I want to dig into some of the key takeaways you had from Grocery Shop, but maybe we just step back for a second because I'm sure there's plenty of people listening to this that have experienced a Shoptalk, Grocery Shop event, but maybe just give us a little bit of what are the origins of Shoptalk? How has it evolved? Maybe a little bit about where it's going, and then we'll talk a little bit more specifically about what's happened here the last 4 days.
Sure, yeah. It's incredible. Our first Shoptalk event was actually only in 2016. So I think for how far we've come in a short period of time, people tend to think we are much more established than we are. They always think we have a bigger team than we do, but we are, I think, about 40 employees at this point, powering this tripod of events, if you will, in person each year. So it's a very, very small team. But I think really the premise of the show back in 2016 when it was founded was to bring all the key stakeholders together in one place to create the future of retail in its digital form. So I think especially when you think back to 2016, even though it wasn't that long ago, the digital team was kind of like not the cool kids on the block, right? They were kind of, this is just an extra expense. Do we really need to invest here? And so I think our premise, our founders at the time, we felt like this community didn't exist, where people could kind of come together, be with like-minded individuals and sort of brainstorm, iterate, and think about the future of retail. And they were incredibly intelligent to really curate our audience. I think that's one thing that is perhaps very unique about us. It feels serendipitous. You're walking around, you're running into, the heads of e-com from this brand, that retailer, and it feels very organic, but like we work very hard to create that serendipity. So that was kind of the founding. And then, from there, I think content has always really been at the heart of what we do. We are not a trade show. We are a conference, and that's very intentionally so. Sure, we have an exhibit hall. We have the hosted program like we were just talking about, but we always want to be content-led. Now, when we think about the future of our show, it can't just be content, right? I think we were just talking about content is somewhat commoditized, and even though I am the head of content, we realize our events need to be much more than just simply coming for content. So you're going to see us leaning a lot heavier into the networking side of things and really sort of taking advantage of the community that we've built and really kind of using that to drive us into the next phase of growth. Yeah,
and I feel, really from the get-go, but obviously it's evolved. One of the things I really liked about the first couple of Shop Talks was it did feel like it was built, everybody talks about being customer-centric, but I really felt like it was like, okay, what do the various stakeholders want out of 2, 3, 4 days together, and let's build it, as opposed to, not to talk smack about other conferences or anything, I speak at a lot of them, but so many of them follow a very old formula, and I kind of understand, the economics of that and why it's still largely the same, but I feel like it's very easy to find things that don't really quite work well for, whether you're a vendor, whether you're a speaker, whether you're a sitting retail executive. So I always felt like you guys have been really focused on who's the audience, what is this for, and it's evolved a lot, certainly, but I think that's really one of the outstanding things. So if folks haven't experienced Shoptalk, Grocery Shop, I think you'll find that there's a lot of things that just really fire on all cylinders.
That means a lot, because I think, even when we're thinking about speaker selection, right, for the main stage, if we're kind of having an internal debate about ourselves, the question is always, does our audience want to hear from them?
Right. Yeah. No, I think that's a great way to do it. I think they want to hear from me. That's the most obvious takeaway. But just in case we can
less of me, more of you.
We can simplify that. But thank you for the self-serving portion of the podcast. We can edit that out, I'm sure.
MarketDial's easy-to-use testing platform emboldens great decisions, leading to reliable, scalable results. With MarketDial, you can be confident in the outcome of your in-store pilot initiatives before rolling them out across your fleet. In a challenging retail climate of supply chain disruption, labor shortages, and dynamic customer behavior, the need for reliable insights has never been greater. Validate your remarkable ideas with MarketDial's in-store testing solution. The proof is in the testing. Learn more at marketdial.com. That's marketdial.com.
Let's talk about Grocery Shop specifically. We touched on a little bit of this, but in terms of what you were hoping to accomplish, and this is the first time it's been in person for 3 years?
Well, we were back in person last year, but candidly,
right.
It was, the height of, I think, what variant was it at that time? Probably Delta.
Right.
So it was, certainly not back the way it is today.
Yeah, but so what were you hoping to get out of this year? Feels like you've accomplished it. But what were you aiming for? How's it turned out? And then maybe things that you really took away from it, particularly if there was something that surprised you or just really you didn't play out maybe necessarily the way you were thinking in a good way.
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think in terms of what we're trying to accomplish, it is always a very tricky combination of trying to allow people to leave with things that they can implement today. So that's what, going back to what I was just talking about, adding more case studies, adding more things that people can kind of go out and feel like they have concrete steps. Like they can go back to their boss and say, hey, these are the 3 things that I learned in this session I need to do to improve my direct to consumer business. But at the same time, we are a strategic show. We want to be looking out toward the future. So finding that combination of, here's what we're doing, here's what's working, here's what's not, as well as what it means for the future is really, I think, the balance that we're trying to strike with our content. So I think from my perspective, as you grow as a show, your first priority is always getting kind of like the marquee speakers. And obviously that's still a priority. We had an amazing lineup. We had Jason Beekle, who is, first time speaking publicly in his role as CEO of Whole Foods. Like we had the president of Campbell's Snacks. Snacking is a huge and growing business. She's an amazing leader, doing a lot of interesting things. So I'm not saying what I'm about to say that we're sacrificing in any way on the caliber of the speakers we get, but I think the biggest priority is making sure once those people are on stage, they're saying things that are important and interesting to our audience. And so we've spent a lot of time as a content team.
It's not always easy, right? The higher you go, the higher you go up in the organization, the more strict and the more guardrails are around what people
It's
think
true.
and say, right?
It's true. And it sometimes it is an uphill battle, but it kind of goes back to what you were talking about, audience feedback. Like we get called out when our speakers are high level. And so we are very candid with our speakers. Like you will get called out if you go up there and just sell your, but the more honest you are, like, look, at the end of the day, we want our speakers to be successful. And so I think just kind of having those candid conversations, like you will not be successful at our show. Our audience is half VP level and higher. They know sustainability is important. They know e-commerce is important. Like let's skip through that and just kind of get to the meat. So it's hard, but it's hard
it's difficult for them, and it's also for the people you choose to interview them, right? Mm-hmm. Because that's a bit, as you know, but more than anyone, that's an art and a skill.
Yes.
As much as just when you must see a bunch of us podcasters doing this and say, fake faux journalists.
No.
My God, they're all around me. I went to school for this. I know this trade craft.
Right, I play a journalist on TV, but I will say, and I don't know if this is too behind the scenes, but having been on the stage several times at your events, the behind the scenes coaching around, particularly if I'm interviewing other people and this idea that they're maybe not going to call out anybody in particular, but basically want to give the investor relations pitch or whatever, and saying like, no, this is not a commercial for your technology or your brand. We're in service to whatever the topic is, and we're trying to get your perspective. And being put in that, it's actually, I think, as somebody interviewing somebody, it's actually quite liberating, because I just know for myself, like I want to learn. Yeah. I don't want to just I can look up your your website and get the fun facts about XYZ company. And you guys do a really good job of not only, I think, creating the content tracks and picking the topics, but making sure that the speakers or the interviews are tailored to really get out what the audience is most likely interested in, not whatever they feel like, pitching or promoting.
Yes, which these days as retailers, we were joking, we always have such sort of strict criteria when we're coaching tech companies, but now retailers are all just kind of out here trying to hawk their retail media networks. We're like, we're going to start having to lecture the retailers, no, you're not here to pitch your retail media network.
Yeah.
Well, listen, let's, we started the conversation with you being at the end of this journey. Let's talk about the next journey. What's coming up next in your life and for the organization, and talk about what's happening next.
Hopefully a little bit of sleep. This is going to be the biggest gap we have. We had Shoptalk in March, and then Shoptalk Europe was in June, and then this was in September. So it's been bang, bang, bang. So we have 6 months until our next in-person event being Shoptalk. So literally once we get out of this show, it's going to be full force, full steam ahead on both Shoptalk and Shoptalk Europe, because they're actually only a month apart next year. So that's going to be pretty tough to pull off.
And tell our audience where they're going to be.
In Vegas for Shoptalk US, and then we're moving Shoptalk Europe to Barcelona, which I'm very excited about. I might
am as well.
Do a venue tour or something in advance, just to make sure everything looks okay. But no, in addition to that, we're going to be moving forward with our virtual meetings programs, which is very exciting. So we'll have Shoptalk Fall Meetup in only a couple of weeks, and then we have Shoptalk Meetup for women, as well as Grocery Shop Spring Meetup next year. So again, those are just virtual meetings offerings. Luckily for the content team, we're not as involved in those, really just kind of scheduling the table talks, recruiting experts and things like that. So I guess I get a little bit of a break, but it'll be starting to think ahead to the 2023 event.
Well, listen, thanks so much for joining us. It was a real treat to meet you and chit and chat about both the tradecraft and what happens on the stage and the speakers, and learn more about the organization, and looking forward to more great content and experiences down the road. And have a good night's sleep. Have several good nights' sleep. Yes. And safe travels for... Where are you based?
I'm actually based in Atlanta, so the rest of the team's in New York or London.
Yeah,
but I'm
I
on the road.
think you're in New York for some reason.
I was in New York. I just moved to Atlanta about 3 years ago. So.
All right. Well, safe travels back to Atlanta. Continued success, and thanks again for joining us here at Grocery Shop at the Remarkable Retail Podcast Studio.
Thank you guys so much for having me. It was fun.
Thanks for joining us on this special bonus episode of Remarkable Retail. Stay tuned for more great interviews from Grocery Shop 2022, and stay tuned for our regular full-length episodes available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, wherever you enjoy your podcast today.